for people is I help them make more money. And usually it starts with something like, I think we're spending too much money on this. How can you help me? Or during the pandemic, it was, I can't find this. I need 150 suites of appliances for a property in New Jersey. I can't get them. What am I going to do? Okay, let me see if I can find this for you because I have a lot of contacts in that industry, right? I spent 25 years dealing with VPs and C-level people doing huge purchases for other large contracts on these exact things. So let me reach out to some of my people.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins.
Since 2019, today's guest has helped investors, owners, and operators add over $5 million per year in recurring net operating income and helped create over $70 million in asset value for their portfolios. This stems from 25 years of experience in the supply chain of things, which is very interesting. These value add scenarios, when we're looking at multifamily properties, think about how much of that process is in the value add process. This beautiful approach at looking at things called the TCO method is really going to dive down into how operators are functioning and then look at a new way of structuring some deals. How can we do this? Are we structuring these deals to hold them? Is there a way that we can make third-party property managers more of our team? Well, hey, today's guest is going to dive into all that. I'm so excited. Everybody, please welcome Andy McQuade to the show. Andy, man, how does it feel to be Andy today?
Today is a good day to be me. My house is empty. Everybody's quiet that's here, which would be a cat and a dog. And, I don't have to do anything other than this program and a whole bunch of paperwork the rest of the day. So
does paperwork actually entail like paper that you touch?
No, I just call it that. It's usually sitting in front of a spreadsheet, reviewing documents. Like, I don't do anything by paper anymore unless I have no choice. So, like, I'll carry a pad and paper with me when I go out to meet people. But as far as this stuff goes, I record it. I use AI. I write everything down via, text in a Word document or OneNote or whatever, and then push it all into one big mess later.
Yeah, my world of
Adobe Sign has saved me a lot of money. And a lot of time.
My world of paper is the craziness of the world that still functions in snail mail, which is like insurance companies and stuff like that. And then my text is or note taking. I've gone down to journals, and really that's all the paper that I want to touch. Sometimes my daughter draws these like little pictures and she'll make things. So I've got like this little fidget thing she's made. It's actually kind of cool, but that's awesome. Let's get rolling. Let's get serious here. So we've got the time. This is what we've got on the schedule to hear for today. This is the Real Estate Mogul MD. I'm not a physician and you're not a physician. So where do we end up? We both are in real estate, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little let's talk a little bit about real estate then. Where does Andy start and where is he at now?
So Andy started in real estate about 25 years ago in Syracuse, New York, working for a lumberyard. And it was supposed to be a high school, like senior year, summertime job. And it sort of morphed into working summers through college. And then before I graduated, they were like, hey, we want to make you full time and promote you. So I went full time. I was full time for a solid 3 months before I was an assistant manager. They call it a co-manager, assistant manager for another lumberyard, same company, just different location. And then about a year and a half after that, I had my own store. I was general manager, hire, fire, outside sales, oversight, all the deliveries, all the inventory control, all that stuff, because it was a very entrepreneurial company. So as a store manager, you basically succeeded or failed on your own merits.
Hmm.
So I did that. I did for that same lumber company. I left my store to run an outside sales team in another city. So I moved for that company. I moved to Rochester in 2003 to take over an $8 million a year sales team, which is about double the volume of the store I had been managing. So everything retail, wholesale, outside sales in my box was like $3.2 million. This sales team by themselves, four guys, was doing a little over 8 million. So I went and did that, took over, had an outside sales guy who left to be a window buyer at the corporate office in Pennsylvania. So I took over his sales accounts. I stopped being the manager and I took over his sales. I tripled the size of that portfolio in about a year. That's, you see opportunity, you take it.
Mhm.
And then Home Depot actually recruited me in 2007 towards the end of the year as part of their pro turnaround that Frank Blake was doing. So they brought me in as a district manager over pro, gave me 7 stores, which eventually led to 9 stores, which in 2015 became 18 stores. And that was around the same time, 2013, 2014, I started working with large multifamily operators. Not quite national account level at that point, but they were local to Rochester. And Rochester has this really weird hub of very large multi-state multifamily operations based here. So kind of cut my teeth into that market locally. And then eventually it led to more national accounts where I was on a plane every 2 to 3 weeks. I had one client spending somewhere between $5 and $7 million a year with me, doing rehabs and turns, taught me their processes, family office. Had a couple of larger operators doing 2 to 6,000 doors that brought me in, and I helped them with stuff. They ended up being, before I was done, 20,000 doors. So I learned through the school of hard knocks very quickly what did and didn't work when you're dealing with something like the Home Depot.
Yeah.
And I left that Home Depot in 2018, ran a sales team for about a year, doing really high-end reclaimed wood product. So flooring, paneling, you name it. If it could be made out of wood, we did it. And we were doing stuff like Amazon and Facebook and like Amazon Blinks offices and all these different big projects. We did a huge project right before I left with Harvard, doing their Living Building Challenge project that took place 2019. And that's about it. Real estate's kind of I've been coached through what needs to happen by my clients. So when I was at the lumberyard doing outside sales, it was home builders, remodelers, commercial GCs. What are your priorities? What can we do to help? Not trying to push crazy stuff that we stink at. Same thing with Home Depot. Where's the niche? How can we make this work? How do I fit into what you're doing? No, I don't want to sell you this because we're terrible at it. Let's focus on these things. So it turned out that we were really good at interiors and not very good at everything else. So we did a lot of interiors for these guys, appliances and flooring and some cabinets, but not really, mostly lighting and just turn supplies. So I learned kind of what their priorities were and how their timeframes worked and found ways to make Home Depot do better for them. So I was kind of taught by the best, which are the guys in the field.
And this, from the supply side, when does this turn into what you're doing now happen? And what are you doing now?
So now I do 2 things. I have this process I've been developing since I went out on my own in 2019 called the TCO method. And that's really a focus that started because of a conversation I had with one of my clients. The main thing I do today for people is I help them make more money. And usually it starts with something like, I think we're spending too much money on this. How can you help me? Or during the pandemic, it was, I can't find this. I need 150 suites of appliances for a property in New Jersey. I can't get them. What am I going to do? Okay, let me see if I can find this for you because I have a lot of contacts in that industry, right? I spent 25 years dealing with VPs and C-level people doing huge purchases for other large contracts on these exact things. So let me reach out to some of my people at, GE or Bosch or whoever it is and see if I can find something for you to fill this need. So that was some of what I did. Most of it now, the TCO method kind of came in because I left the job at the reclaimed wood place because a large multifamily operator called me. He was a vice president, just took over procurement and risk management. and wanted to pick my brain. He's like, you know everything we do, you know everything we buy, you know how we handle our contracts. Where would you start if you were me? Half-hour coffee turned into a 3.5 hour long conversation that ended with, you should be doing this full time. Oh, yeah, maybe I should be doing this full time, actually. So I filed an LLC a couple weeks later, started working with his company shortly after I left the job at the reclaimed wood place. It was about a month and a half of lag time in there because I wanted to try and make it to a year, and I gave my 2 weeks. So my last day would fall exactly on the 1 year mark. And he was like, you can just leave. I turned in my credit card and my keys, and I left the day I turned in my 2 weeks, but It is what it is. The customer that really triggered the TCO method, we were talking about how he could make more money at a large apartment complex in Erie, Pennsylvania. And it came down to some of the stuff he was using to rehab this place because it was a very C-, maybe a D property. It was very, very rough, 30% vacant, 3 condemned buildings on the property out of like 18 buildings, like just you name it, this thing had value add written all over it. And he brought me in about midstream because he wanted to find out if there were ways they could change things so they could cash flow better, because his plan was to hold this thing for as long as possible. He kind of shifted gears and wanted to make it into a buy and hold. So I went out and just kind of walked the property, spent a couple days out there meeting with the guys and the crews doing all the work and all the reconstruction, looked at what they were buying, what they were paying, where they were getting it from, what kind of discounts and rebates, and figured out this guy has no idea. Like, his crews are doing the work. They're doing decent work. The quality's okay, right? I mean, it's a C property, trying to bring it up to like a C+ or a B- maybe on a good day. But it wasn't so much the stuff they were using. It was more, they weren't leveraging any buying power, because this wasn't his only property. He had properties in Rochester and New York City and Jersey and all these other places. And they were all disjointed. They weren't making any sense whatsoever as far as how or why they were purchasing what they were purchasing or where they were getting it from. So yes, each property itself might have been, all the same light fixture, all the same flooring, all the same plumbing fixtures and electrical and all that other stuff. But there was no leverage on their part as far as getting alignment on every property should be buying from these vendors, because we will give these vendors this much in sales per year and ask them for service and terms and pricing and rebates and all of these other things. So that was really the highlight. And then actually we were talking about, well, okay, how do I make more money on this property specifically now that we're already halfway done? So we looked at the basics, doing electrical audit, seeing if there was a utility that would come in and do some LED upgrades for free or at a discount through a grant program or something like that. We did the same thing for the water authority. We did the same thing for whatever. We went and we analyzed their water. And for this particular property, it was like 720 doors. They were spending $335,000 a year in water and sewer. I was like, that's really high. Why is that so high for Pennsylvania? That seems a little ridiculous, even for like kind of that COVID era when everybody's like locked up and they're using more water than usual. I'm like, that sounds really high to me. So we did an audit, and they were still using toilets from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So you're talking about 8.5 gallon, 9 gallon flush toilets. We're like, well, what are you putting in? And we looked at it, and they're going to, 1.2, 1.6 gallon flush toilets, no big deal. But the typical $99 cheapo toilet or $69 cheapo toilet at the time, from like Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. And it's like, well, how much are you spending on labor? So we actually did a deep dive on what their estimated labor was going to be, broke that all out. And we could have cut their water bill by about $90,000 a year if we had gone, not including the labor and overhead of replacing flappers every 3 years and all that stuff. So we actually looked at it. We did the analysis, took it to the water authority. They're like, yeah, we don't really meter you guys. We sort of just ran water up there through the fire hydrant. So we charge you this much per month per unit, and we're not going to change that. So we don't care how much water you save or what this is going to do to make our lives easier. We're just not going to give you a discount. So you can go ahead and install whatever you want, but we're not going to actually play ball and reduce your bill. It's like, oh, okay, thanks, Erie, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Way to go. See where your priorities lie. It was insane. It was completely nuts. And it really, for my client, it really kind of chapped him a little bit because the town was basically saying, we're not going to do anything to reduce your bills, even though it's completely in our control to do so. Cool.
Interesting.
Awesome. So most of what I do and what I did for him on the total cost of ownership side was figuring out where he could make changes at the beginning of this rehab process that would pay dividends over time. So like if he had decided to do the toilet thing regardless with no help from the town, he still would have seen about a 36-month payback because of the lack of maintenance from putting those in. Like he's replacing toilets anyway. It would have been like a $30 to $35 bump per closet to change to this different toilet. This different toilet had no flapper, which means no leaks, which means no service, which means no calls or constantly running water, extra water bills. This is all before we knew that they had no interest in actually doing anything to conserve water or generate less waste. So it was a learning curve for me because I'd never seen anybody just out and out say, nah, we're not interested in doing anything to help the environment or cut your bills or do anything more efficiently.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So just go to the other water company that's able to provide water for that area, right? That's how that works.
Yes, the monopolies are great, aren't they?
Yeah. So I heard you say total cost of ownership, and I see the logo there for TCO method. That's what we're talking about, right? The total cost of ownership. That is
it is,
TCO
and
method.
this is really this is the project where it really occurred to me, because as we were reviewing it, I said, listen, the stuff you should be doing should be focusing on reducing your total cost of ownership. And we talked about the water thing, and we talked about the maintenance thing, and then we talked about, well, what kind of floors are you putting in? Are you putting in this or that? What are you doing for appliances? Are these appliances going to have ice makers? Are you going to run the water lines or not? Because that's going to increase your costs over time, because those lines snap and they fail when people move appliances to clean, or for whatever reason, they leak, they have issues. Your cost is going to go up if you're putting water in your ice makers. Like, just don't buy ice makers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it came down to for me, coming from the materials and supply side and working with these larger operators for as long as I did, it was common sense stuff that I basically saw them do to avoid costs. So it's a little bit of like risk management, cost avoidance, reducing maintenance costs, reducing overhead. A good example is in New York State back, I think 2016, they passed a law that in 2019, all smoke detectors that were sold in the state had to be 10-year sealed lithium, no battery op of any kind. So no 9-volt, no AA. And at the time, everybody freaked out because they're like, oh my God, these are so much expensive. They're 3 times the price of the standards that we've been using for the last 20 years. What's wrong with these? And I feel for them, sort of, but I look at how much it costs to actually put a human body in that unit every 6 months or a year to change those batteries and push the button and do the other stuff. And I go, I really don't have a whole lot of sympathy when you're paying somebody to go in and do this every single year, and how much do they cost you per hour, and what does it take out of their day from an efficiency standpoint to make this happen, to schedule the time to get in the unit, to do all of this craziness, and then put the batteries in, which are almost as expensive as the stupid smoke detector itself. If you're talking a $5 smoke detector and you're putting 2 AA's or a 9-volt in. So for me, the long-term trigger is you're going to spend a lot more changing batteries and putting people in that unit every 6 months to a year to test it, if you're going to take ownership of that, versus just putting a 10-year in and just throwing it away and putting a new one in when it dies, right? Like, if they start to choke, they start beeping like crazy. Mm-hmm. And what people don't realize on the insurance side of it is, so this is like the risk management cost avoidance thing. If you have a smoke detector, they're only good for 10 years anyway, because they go off, they detect the smoke because it creates an electrical connection in this radioactive isotope with a half-life. So it's very technical and nobody really cares. But the reason they went to a 10-year sealed lithium, and the reason New York State passed a law, is because they were having too many fires with 20 and 25-year-old smoke detectors that wouldn't go off. People kept changing the batteries and pushing the button and it beeps. So you've proved the button works, the battery works, and the speaker works, but you haven't actually proved that it's going to go off in the event of a fire.
Mhm.
which is the core purpose of the device, is to go off when there's a fire. So the, long and short of it, I guess, is it's a really small thing, but on a property with 100, 200, 300 units, what does that save you every year? Just in overhead, right? Like
Mhm.
I can order, I do this all the time for people, is I get, bulk packages of these smoke detectors, the 10-year sealed lithium, and people cry all the time. They're so much more expensive. We just ordered like 270 of them for a property. They were like $12 a piece. Are they really that outrageously expensive? It's $12
Mhm.
compared to the labor cost of putting somebody in a unit. And there's a ton of examples of that where it's like, you can spend this now or spend this much more over time. So when you start combining all of these things, you start to find efficiencies in labor, in overhead, in, sometimes utilities, sometimes not. It depends on the building, right? Most buildings built after 2005 don't necessarily need complete upgrades on thermostats and lighting and, furnaces and boilers and toilets and all that, because they're already kind of efficient, and there's already like insulation for the most part because of building code improvements that really kind of kicked in that 2005 to 2010 area. And the buildings aren't that old, right? The wear and tear isn't there. You're not getting pinholes from copper leaking all over the place. You're not getting, cast iron drains that are failing. You don't have aluminum wiring in the buildings. So there's a lot of advantages to those kind of those newer builds that maybe reduces the opportunity to replace products to make things super efficient. But you can still do things to cut the labor side down. So the TCO method is really all about minimizing your exposure, minimizing your risk, and minimizing your labor costs over time without doing, deferred maintenance, without getting rid of headcount. Like there's nothing in what I do that recommends, oh yeah, well now you have all these things in place, so now you can go to, one maintenance guy for every 130 doors instead of every 100 doors. Like that's not part of the program. I'm sure there's people out there who do that, but the program really just works on building efficiencies so you can get ahead of stuff and do things on like more of a preventive maintenance standpoint. So there's a software suite out there that kind of integrates in with a whole bunch of ERPs, right? Like One Site, ERD, whatever. And it focuses on the preventive maintenance thing. And it actually basically pays for itself because it helps your team schedule ahead before things start to go sideways. It keeps track of, this was done this year. Typical lifespan is this. Start thinking about doing this now. And it helps you prep your reserves. It helps you prep your cash flow. It helps you prep all of your maintenance service and stuff so that you're not just reacting constantly and spending that money to take the call or take the ticket off the online portal to then generate the thing, go to the unit, see what's wrong, go back to the shop, get stuff, or drive to Lowe's. So you want to reduce that windshield time. You want to reduce the overhead and operating costs of actually dealing with the stuff by just avoiding it, is a lot
Mhm.
of it. But it all looks at that long-term thing, that long-term value to you as an owner and what that returns to you in profit by boosting your net operating income. Because at the end of the day, if you're saving $1, it's like adding $2 to top line. Well, right now you can't really raise rent, right? Rents in most markets have capped. Maybe they're going down, right? We're seeing a huge glut of apartments that are going to hit throughout 2024 that are going to be rent ready. And we're going to see some markets are going to see actual decreases for the first time in years, right? Since before the pandemic. So how do you increase your NOI when you can't increase your rent, right? People aren't going to just decide that they're going to pay you to add a parking pass. They're not just going to decide they're going to pay you to use a on-site gym or a pool or if you decide to start doing one of those multi-level marketing cable and internet bundling services where you sell it to the tenants, like they're not necessarily going to buy into that. Are those ways to drive NOI? Yeah. Are they going to work? Time will tell, right? We're getting into some interesting times right now. How do you increase your NOI? Increase your NOI by building in efficiencies and saving money. Some of that is product, right? Some of that is personnel, but a lot of it comes down to just doing things smarter and being more efficient and avoiding those problems down the road. So if you can put a product in and you're going to hold, a lot of this has to do with holding stuff long term. If you're going to hold something for 2 years, or if you're in a syndication, you're going to hold it for 5 to 7, some of the stuff doesn't make sense. right? Because if you're doing a rehab when you purchase this property and you're just going to unload it in 5 years, it shouldn't necessarily matter to you that the fixture you put in can last for 20, right? Are you going to pay a premium to do that if it doesn't save you anything in the period of time that you own it? Probably not, right? The math doesn't necessarily add up for you. But if you're looking for, you're in a C property, you turn units about 50% every year, that means that you're going to have to do some light turns every single year on these doors. Well, what if you have some where, you put your flooring in and you don't have to replace that flooring for 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, regardless of pets, regardless of wear and tear from kids, regardless of spills and the other stuff. Oh, well, that seems to make sense. Well, it does make sense. And yet we still see people buying laminate floors that are basically cardboard with a picture of wood stamped on it.
Yeah.
Right. And they're still installing them in rentals. And then they want to withhold payment from the customer when they move out of their security deposit to replace or repair that part of the damaged floor. And it's like, is it really their fault? Like, yeah, you put it in the unit. Yeah, they signed the lease that makes them responsible. But if you spill something on the floor, which is normal wear and tear, in my opinion, and you leave it for longer than 5 to 7 minutes and the floor is ruined, is that really their fault or is that your fault at the beginning of the process? I tend to think it's your fault, right? Not necessarily theirs, because life happens. So, and I've seen nightmare stuff. Like I've seen people put in pre-finished hardwoods that are gorgeous and have somebody with a dishwasher leak or, a fridge leak or whatever happen, or a flood of any kind, and all of it cups because the top is sealed and the bottom is not. The water leaks down underneath it. Wood expands when it's wet, so it just curves, and then it dries with, you could roll marbles down. It looks like a bowling alley. Stuff like that's going to happen. It's part of ownership. It's why we have insurance. But you can avoid a lot of those issues by just thinking 2 or 3 steps down the road. Well, what kind of tenant am I going to have in here? Are they going to have pets or are they not going to have pets? Are they going to have kids or they're not going to have kids? Well, maybe I spend the extra 50 cents a square foot and use this instead of this. And then I can keep that floor for 5 to 7 years, right? But again, we still see sheet vinyl. We still see laminate. It's not a perfect answer. And there's some times where you just can't afford it. So it's a numbers thing. How long are you going to hold this? And what does this extra step or extra cost now add back to your NOI in year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5? And that's where the TCO method comes in, because it makes you kind of take all of the decisions you're making on who you're buying from and what you're buying and why you're buying it. And you look at it through that. Well, what does this cost me in that year 2, 3, 4, 5? 90% of the people out there aren't that proactive. They're not looking at year 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're looking at, I want to see these returns now. I want to come in as far below budget as I can because everything runs over budget. I want it to come as fast as I can. I don't really have to plan ahead, right? Because that's an extra step. I don't really want to have to plan ahead and pre-order all this stuff. So it becomes which one's more important? And if you're holding it for 2 years, there's a pretty clear answer that it's not necessarily putting things in place that are going to last for 5 to 10 years, because that's not your baby. And the next owner is going to come in and just turn the thing anyway. The other part of the equation is, in this market, with cap rate compression and all the other stuff that's going on with interest rates and people, the rate cuts that may or may not happen notwithstanding, what you're looking at from an ownership standpoint, from an investor standpoint, is the question of, I'm going to sell this property eventually. I'm putting all these extra efficiencies in place that are based around my labor, right? Based around my operating efficiency, based around all of these other, we'll call it soft cost factors that maybe don't show until you've proven that they work on the P&L, right? The next guy that comes in maybe isn't going to be that good at operating a property. Maybe they're going to hire a third-party property manager. Do you think a third-party property manager has any interest in really being efficient and driving down maintenance calls and labor costs and all of the extra stuff that they're going to charge a fee to execute above and beyond the percentage that they're in there for? Probably not, right? So if you're using third-party property management, you can't really force them to change and become more efficient. which means that a lot of these efficiencies that are being driven, right? There's a couple of talking head gurus out there who are like, we're going to make everything super efficient. We're going to do this and this. And a lot of it is like, deferred maintenance, in my opinion. A lot of it is just finding ways to move that needle in the short term and not over the long term. But the reality is the next buyer is not going to give that any serious weight unless they're vertically integrated and they control the property management arm or a construction arm or both of their company. So if they're coming in with third-party property management, they're gonna look at your 40% operating, they're gonna look at your 35% operating, and they're gonna kick that to 50 because it's just not realistic. They're gonna look at it and go, I can't do that. I don't know what you're doing. I think your T12 is crazy. I think you're manipulating numbers, and I'm just not going to underwrite the deal at that. So, especially now that we're getting into times when conservative underwriting is extremely important, they're not going to just take you at your word that you're at 35 on a 2005 apartment complex in Southwest Texas. It ain't going to happen, right? Between insurance cost adjustments and all of the extra labor costs, just to get a mechanic to show up now, just to have a maintenance guy show up, what you were paying a guy $15 an hour for 2 years ago, good luck getting them to even show up to work for less than 20 or 25. So everything is costing more. Your NOI is being eroded. How are you going to justify this extra expense that you're putting out there? And I don't have good answers for that, right? That's not necessarily like I don't do the underwriting. I'm just what I see in the marketplace. The system is very good for buy and hold commercial value add integrated operator owners. If you bring in a third-party property management company, I've seen really good deals with family offices where they bring in third-party property management and they JV on the property, where the property management company has skin in the game to the success of that property. That is an awesome way to get a third-party property manager to get efficient, because all of a sudden the profitability of the property becomes their problem as well as the problem for whatever investor GP LP structure exists there already. Most third-party property managers do not have the capital to just buy into a property. So, it's a tough ask, but there are certain ones out there that have done that. There's models out there that have succeeded in doing JVs and, syndication structures where they could get that to function and be profitable and really make it almost like it was a vertically integrated deal, but it's not directly vertically integrated because they're still separate entities, except for at that very top JV level. So just things to think about.
That structure is very interesting. And I've seen that in the residential world where, the same way with getting a contractor. And I mean, I started as a contractor, getting a contractor to show up, care about what they're doing and doing efficiently and effectively. Good luck. So you start this idea of, okay, what if they had skin in the game? Well, they don't have any, most of the time they don't have any skin to put in the game, like the property management piece you're just talking about. So what if there was an equity multiple or something? So that relationship with the property management thing is really interesting, and how that TCO doesn't apply. The TCO method doesn't apply when the third party is there. And if you're underwriting a deal, I mean, it's spot on. I'm not going to, okay, Andy, you're going to do 35% on your operating expense here, right? Yeah, right. Not me. And then I'm going to write my own numbers. And then there's I forget what it's actually called, but things expand to the limit that you give them. So if Correct. You give it this limit of 50%, then I'm okay using this third party, and they're charging me, 10% here, 15% here, $350 to fix a kitchen faucet or something. So I can see all of these things coming in and playing. So lots of stuff you just laid out here, man. And the biggest takeaways I'm pulling: one, the TCO method, monster, the cost of ownership, the true cost of ownership. One thing you mentioned in there was scheduling a time to get in the unit. My goodness, how difficult can that be? And you don't even think about that. Well, I've got to have this guy to fix this, and he charged me this. Good luck getting in there. Some tenants just get lost. They don't, and then they'll be upset with you the whole time that something's broken. So that in itself is massive. But the total cost of ownership, all of that goes into 5 steps down the road, what's happening, and really caring about it. the vertical integration piece. So if you are partnering in this process, you mentioned family office, so you could integrate vertically with construction, property management, ownership, all of this stuff. That's a beautiful model because the difference is in the operation. I spoke with somebody not too long ago, and they said that the returns are in the scale. Well, guess what else is in the scale? The losses. The losses are in the scale too, because these little things add up. You're talking about a flapper, and I'm dealing with a flapper on a little single family home, a little toilet. The tenant says, "Hey, the toilet keeps filling up, and could you get that taken care of?" So that little thing is not a huge issue for that. I mean, for that person's life in this little single family house, you don't want to pay extra in water. But if you take that and multiply it times 720 units, my goodness, as long as you're not in Erie, Pennsylvania, where they don't care about what you spend versus what they're charging you and all of that stuff. So
Right.
massive, man. I just spit all of that stuff back out at you. And the last thing I want to touch on here is, what does it mean to hit the bell?
So when you're on a platform like Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, they all have a little bell, right? Or YouTube, where you ring the bell to subscribe. And so every time the person you hit the bell on posts, it'll flag into your notifications. So you're basically saying, I follow these people, or I'm connected to these people on LinkedIn, but I like what they have to say. So I want to see more of it in my feed. So you can force that by not necessarily having it show in your feed, but getting an actual for real notification, a push notification into your phone that says this person posted this today. So all my banners say, hit the bell and subscribe. And that's because the show on YouTube, the LinkedIn posts, and, Twitter too, but I'm not super active on Twitter yet.
I'm more
because
everybody else calls it
on Twitter.
It X. No, it's
yeah, whatever it is.
Hey,
I'm still in the old school. If I can still go to twitter.com and see things, then it's still Twitter until they turn that off and it's x.com.
Yeah, I still call it Twitter too. Yeah. So, but no, it's perfect. Hit the bell. And the reason why I want to say that is because there's so much experience and so much thought that goes into everything that you're doing. And for me, hitting the bell is something in the TCO method. I think that should be, hey, if you want to get this thing and you really want to ring it as an operator, and if you're even thinking about anybody out there in LP scenarios, limited partner, general partner, if you're sponsoring, whatever you're doing, if you want to ring the bell and really crush it, it's going to come down to the operator. It's going to come down to the underwriter. And how are you putting these things together? And it's by building your community, surrounding yourself with people who do this. I mean, you make my head hurt, Andy, how far you go into these things. And the reality of it is, man, if you stack all that up, it totally makes sense when you sit here and talk about it. So let's give a new thing to ring the bell, and let's put that on the TCO method and say, hey, you really want to get this? You want to get it right? Ring the bell. And on this, they can find you at andymcquade.com. And that's ANDYMCQUADE.com. andymcquade.com. Man, just a wealth of knowledge. You've got massive clients you've worked with, and you've seen from the supply side that's built this experience for you so many opportunities to ring the bell, tighten it up a little bit, and increase that NOI, right?
Absolutely. So as of, I think it was March, I haven't looked at the numbers to close out 2024, but as of March of 23, it was an additional 5 million in annual recurring NOI back. And at the time, I could still say that was at a 6 cap, because most of the properties I work on are value add, which puts them in that D, C, B plus market. I try to stay away from the luxury stuff personally, because I can move the needle a lot more at the lower end, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s stock product. But it was about $70 million worth of additional asset value at a 6 cap. Right now, I don't want to say what that would be at an 8 cap because it makes me sad. So we're just going to move on.
Yeah. Perfect. But the knowledge is there, and it can be implemented, applied, and if anything, learned from. So reaching out to you at andymcquade.com. Man, I really appreciate your time today.
No, thanks, Brett. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me jaw a little bit about what I do. People don't like all the technical stuff necessarily, but it was my life. And the only reason I had to learn it all was because if I didn't, it would always come back to bite me because it was always my headache when something went wrong. I put this in my unit and it's falling apart, and I've got this across 300 different doors, and it's failing in all of them. Are you going to replace them all for me? It's
Yeah.
not a call. That's not a call you want, but it's calls I took, right?
Yeah.
That was part of it. You see Home Depot, they have deep pockets. Guess what?
Yeah.
You're going to pay that bill.
Yeah.
So those are things I learned to avoid in my career,
Mhm.
and not overpromise and underdeliver, which Home Depot is very famous for doing.
Mhm.
So I sort of tried to set myself aside and apart from everything else there by just doing what we were good at and avoiding all the other crap.
Yep.
So.
Yep. I love it, man. The TCO method definitely is going to stay in my mind, and the ring and the bell on Twitter is going to stay in my mind as well too. Again, thank you for your time today and sharing all that knowledge. Really appreciate it. To listeners out there, as always, thank you for your time and your attention. Man, so much value here in the TCO method, and just years and years of experience compiling these situations, these challenges, and really thinking it through. Hey, this happened. I don't want it to happen again. So if you just take a chance to reach out to Andy at andymcquade.com, and look at all the value that's there, because so many of the listeners out there today are looking at LP situations, potentially even GP. How do you vet the jockey? Well, this is the way, getting this type of thinking in your mind when you're looking at these deals and who's underwriting them. These are great questions to have and to ask yourself. So go ahead, reach out to him. And if you have any questions for us, info@physicianwealthsystems.com. Just send me an email. I want to talk with you. I want to chat with you. Thank you again for your time. We'll talk to you soon.